Today's service was much quieter. The guests were admitted by invitation only, and there were only 200 of those sent out. A few fans without invitations showed up at the door, but they were quietly turned away.
In the shadowy world of martial arts legends, few stories have captured public imagination quite like the mysterious death of Bruce Lee. For decades, Chuck Norris, Lee's closest friend and training partner, maintained a stoic silence about the circumstances surrounding the Dragon's untimely passing. Now, after years of speculation, Norris has finally broken his silence, revealing shocking details that challenge everything we thought we knew about Lee's final days. The story begins in 1967 at the prestigious All-American Karate Championship in Madison Square Garden. Two rising stars of the martial arts world were about to cross paths in a moment that would change both their lives forever. Bruce Lee, already making waves with his groundbreaking Hong Kong films The Big Boss and Fist of Fury, watched from the sidelines as Chuck Norris dominated the competition. Despite their different backgrounds and styles, both men recognized in each other a kindred spirit, a dedication to martial arts that transcended mere physical combat. After the tournament, Lee approached Norris with an unusual proposition. "Don't you live in LA?" he asked. "I do too. Why don't we start training together?" This simple question would lead to one of the most legendary partnerships in martial arts history. Training in Lee's backyard became a daily ritual. It was here that both men would push each other to new heights of excellence. Norris, standing 5 feet 10 inches and weighing 160 pounds, was amazed by Lee's ability to generate incredible power from his compact 5 feet 7 inches, 140-pound frame. Within 6 months of their training sessions, Lee had mastered high kicks that rivaled Norris's own expertise, a technique he had previously dismissed as impractical. Their friendship reached its cinematic pinnacle in 1972 with Way of the Dragon. The film's climactic fight scene, set in Rome's ancient Colosseum, remains one of the most celebrated sequences in martial arts cinema. Shot over 3 grueling days, the 10-minute and 14-second fight showcased both men's extraordinary skills and their contrasting styles. The film, made on a modest budget of $130,000, would go on to gross over $130 million worldwide, becoming Hong Kong's highest-grossing film of 1972. But behind the scenes, Norris noticed troubling changes in his friend's behavior. In 1968, Lee suffered a devastating back injury during a routine exercise known as Good Mornings. The injury, a slipped disc, would prove to be a turning point in Lee's life. Determined to recover and prove himself stronger than ever, Lee threw himself into rehabilitation with characteristic intensity, often against medical advice. Norris watched with growing concern as Lee's regime became increasingly extreme. Bruce was taking handfuls of supplements and vitamins, Norris revealed. He would consume incredible amounts of protein, sometimes eating 10 eggs or 2 pounds of beef in a single meal. He was drinking gallons of water daily, convinced it would help flush toxins from his body. On July 20th, 1973, the mounting pressure would reach its tragic conclusion. While working on Game of Death in Hong Kong, Lee complained of headaches and dizziness. At the apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei, he took what seemed like a routine painkiller for his headache. Hours later, the unthinkable happened. Bruce Lee, the man who seemed invincible, was pronounced dead at the age of 32. During a recent martial arts exposition at San Diego Comic-Con, Norris finally shared his theory about what really happened to his friend. According to Norris, Lee's death wasn't simply the result of cerebral edema, as officially reported. Instead, it was a perfect storm of factors. Lee's allergic reaction to aspirin, combined with his extreme supplement regimen and excessive water consumption, created a lethal combination that his body couldn't handle. The heat stroke theory, proposed by biographer Matthew Polly, suggests a startling connection between Bruce Lee's death and a cosmetic procedure he underwent. According to Polly's research, Lee had his sweat glands surgically removed to prevent excessive sweating during film shoots. This seemingly minor decision may have had fatal consequences. In Hong Kong's intense heat and humidity, where temperatures often soared past 90 degrees Fahrenheit, Lee's compromised ability to regulate his body temperature through sweating put him at severe risk. This risk was compounded by his grueling training regimen, which involved hours of strenuous exercise. Just months before his death, Lee collapsed during a dubbing session for Enter the Dragon. While doctors diagnosed cerebral edema at the time, Polly suggests this may have been an early warning sign of heat stroke. On the day of his death, the combination of Hong Kong's sweltering weather, Lee's inability to sweat properly, and his use of medications that could mask heat stroke symptoms may have created the perfect storm that led to his tragic end. But not everyone accepts these explanations. Some theorists point to more sinister forces at work. The Hong Kong triads, notorious for their control over the film industry, allegedly saw Lee as a threat to their power. His refusal to pay protection money and his outspoken criticism of corruption made him powerful enemies. Some even suggest that Lee might have fallen victim to Dim Mak, the legendary death touch of martial arts lore. Perhaps the most chilling theory involves an ancient curse allegedly placed on the Lee family during the Tang dynasty. The curse, said to target male descendants, seemed to gain credibility when Lee's son Brandon died under equally mysterious circumstances in 1993 while filming The Crow. Chuck Norris, who had mentored Brandon after his father's death, was devastated by this second tragedy. Despite the enduring mystery surrounding his death, Bruce Lee's impact on martial arts and popular culture remains undisputed. His philosophy of Jeet Kune Do revolutionized martial arts thinking, emphasizing adaptability and personal expression over rigid tradition. Modern MMA champions like Conor McGregor cite Lee as an inspiration, and UFC president Dana White has called him the father of mixed martial arts. Bruce Lee's impact extended far beyond his physical prowess in martial arts. He was an intellectual who voraciously consumed philosophical works from diverse traditions, creating a unique blend of Eastern wisdom and Western thought. His personal library revealed the depth of his intellectual curiosity, featuring works by influential thinkers like Alan Watts, who bridged Eastern and Western philosophy, Carl Jung's psychological insights, and Friedrich Nietzsche's revolutionary philosophical ideas. Lee integrated these philosophical influences into his martial arts practice and teaching. He transformed traditional martial arts from mere combat techniques into a vehicle for personal growth and spiritual development. His approach to Jeet Kune Do wasn't just about fighting efficiency. It embodied his philosophy of breaking free from rigid traditions and finding one's authentic path. Chuck Norris, who witnessed Lee's philosophical evolution firsthand, understood that his friend's greatest contribution wasn't just his fighting skill, but his ability to revolutionize how the world viewed martial arts. As Norris poignantly noted, Lee was a phenomenon who forever changed martial arts perception globally. Despite his tragically early death at 32, Lee's philosophical legacy continues to resonate, inspiring practitioners to view martial arts not just as combat training, but as a transformative journey of self-discovery and personal liberation. Lee's integration of philosophy into martial arts helped elevate it from a purely physical discipline to a comprehensive path of self-development, influencing generations of practitioners and thinkers worldwide. The mystery of Bruce Lee's death may never be fully resolved, but through Chuck Norris's revelations, we gain a more complete picture of the man behind the legend. A warrior who pushed the boundaries of human potential, sometimes at great personal cost. As Lee himself once said, "The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering." By that measure, Bruce Lee achieved immortality long before his untimely death. Today, nearly 50 years after his passing, Bruce Lee's influence continues to grow. From the UFC octagon to Hollywood films, from philosophy to fitness, his impact resonates across generations and cultures. Through Chuck Norris's candid revelations, we not only gain insight into Lee's final days, but also a deeper appreciation for the complex, driven individual who forever changed martial arts and popular culture. As San Francisco prepares to erect a monument in his honor, and new generations discover his work through biopics and documentaries, one thing becomes clear: the dragon spirit burns as brightly as ever, transcending the mysteries surrounding his death to inspire future generations of martial artists, philosophers, and dreamers.
In the world of martial arts, few names carry as much weight as Bruce Lee. But beneath the surface of his legendary status lies a shocking truth about the extreme methods that forged his extraordinary abilities. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the dangerous and revolutionary training techniques that made Bruce Lee a legend. At just 135 pounds, Bruce Lee possessed strength that seemed to defy physics. His power-to-weight ratio was extraordinary, leading many to question how someone so lean could generate such explosive force. The answer lies in training methods so intense that they would make modern fitness experts nervous. Historical clips of Lee training.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Lee broke away from traditional martial arts doctrine in a controversial move that would change combat sports forever. While other martial artists avoided weight training, believing it would make them slow and inflexible, Lee embraced it. But with a twisted innovation that was uniquely his own. Lee's training philosophy was built on 4 dangerous pillars. 1. Maximum force generation through extreme isometrics. 2nd, explosive speed training at the edge of human capability. 3. Unconventional strength development. 4th, brutal endurance conditioning. But what made these methods truly revolutionary was how he combined them into a single, punishing system. Demonstration of isometric exercises. One of Lee's most controversial methods was his revolutionary approach to isometric training, pushing the boundaries of what many thought possible. He would spend grueling hours pushing against immovable objects with maximum force, attempting to engage every single muscle fiber in his body. This technique, while remarkably effective for building strength.
Well, this brings up something. You were in one of Bruce Lee's great movies.
Return of the Dragon.
Return of the Dragon.
Yeah.
And this is a famous fight scene that you had with Bruce Lee.
I still consider it a classic.
It holds up. I
amazing.
watched it today, and you know they've advanced fight scenes so much, but this really holds up. It's an amazing fight scene.
Well, I think the main reason, Bruce was really ahead of his time. And I worked out with Bruce Lee, and I worked out for 3 years. That's when I held the world title. And then he went to Hong Kong to pursue his movie career, did a couple movies, very successful. So he called me up and said, I want to do a movie with a fight scene that everyone will remember called Return of the Dragon. He said, would you come over and do the fight scene with me? I said, well, do I have to lose? He says, yeah, you have to lose. So I said, all right. So I went over there, and I'd seen his first 2 movies. I said, the guys you fight don't even have a chance. I mean, they don't even touch you, you know? And he said, no, we'll make this a seesaw battle. And so we made it fight back and forth, and it became a classic.
That was unusual at the time, because in that fight scene, you knock him down a few times, and it's pretty close, and he didn't allow that, did he?
No, I was the only one ever to really do that, fighting. But again, he respected me because of my ability as a world champion at the time.
Carried serious risks of tissue damage and nervous system fatigue that would make modern trainers hesitate. The intensity of Lee's isometric training was almost frightening to witness. He would push against concrete walls relentlessly until his muscles visibly trembled and shook, far beyond what most would consider the point of failure. During these sessions, he'd hold strenuous positions until complete muscular failure occurred, often pushing through the burning sensation that would cause others to stop. Perhaps most daringly, he would attempt to lift what he knew were impossible weights, engaging in what he called overcoming isometrics, applying maximum force against an immovable object. This method wasn't just about physical strength. It was about pushing past mental barriers that typically limit human performance. Lee believed that by forcing his muscles to work against unmovable resistance, he could recruit more muscle fibers than traditional training methods allowed.
Before I let you go, we are approaching the 40th anniversary that involved one Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Put that photo up, and I want to ask the captain about this photo almost 40 years later. Tell me, what do you recall about this almost 40 years ago?
Oh, that's my first trip to Hong Kong with my good friend Bruce Lee. He said, come on, we're going to make a movie. You can be the villain. I said, sure. Why not? And I flew over to Hong Kong, and I was the villain. And that ended up being the last movie that he made.
Yeah. It's a great photo, though.
Oh, yeah. It was fun working with Bruce. He was a great guy.
Would often incorporate these isometric holds into his regular training, creating a unique hybrid system that challenged his body in ways that hadn't been seen before in martial arts training. The risk of injury was always present, but Lee believed the potential benefits outweighed the dangers, even though this method of training placed enormous stress on his nervous system and connective tissues. Speed training techniques of Bruce Lee. Lee's speed training methods were particularly alarming even by today's advanced training standards. He believed in pushing his movements to superhuman velocities, often training at speeds that made his contemporaries nervous about the risk of serious injury. His approach to speed development was revolutionary but dangerous, combining elements that most trainers would hesitate to put together. At the core of his speed training was an almost obsessive focus on explosive power. He would practice punches with explosive resistance, using specialized equipment and rubber bands to create tension that fought against his lightning-fast strikes. This wasn't just about throwing fast punches. Lee would perform every exercise at maximum velocity, whether it was bodyweight movements, weight training, or martial arts techniques. He believed that training at anything less than maximum speed was a waste of precious training time. What made his speed training even more intense was his use of weighted clothing during these high-velocity drills. While others might use weights for strength training, Lee would wear them during speed work, creating a dangerous but effective combination that forced his muscles to adapt to both resistance and velocity simultaneously. Perhaps most remarkably, he would train multiple muscle groups at high speeds simultaneously, coordinating complex movements that challenged both his nervous system and muscular control. This integrated approach to speed training was years ahead of its time, but it came with significant risks that modern sports science has only recently begun to understand. The 1965 fight with Wong Jack Man marked a dramatic turning point in Lee's training approach. After this legendary confrontation, Lee realized his conditioning needed to reach even more extreme levels. This led to a complete overhaul of his training methods, pushing him to gain 25 pounds of muscle while maintaining his legendary speed. Lee's daily training routine was nothing short of punishing, stretching from early morning until late evening in a relentless pursuit of martial arts perfection. His day would begin at the crack of dawn, with the morning session running from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. This grueling start included a challenging 5-mile run while wearing a weighted vest, pushing his cardiovascular system to its limits before most people had even started their day. Following this, he would dedicate 2 intense hours to technical martial arts practice, meticulously refining his movements and techniques. The morning session would continue with an hour of specialized strength training, culminating in core conditioning exercises performed until complete muscle failure. The afternoon session, running from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., focused on explosive power and speed development. During these hours, Lee would engage in intensive speed training drills, followed by power development exercises that pushed the boundaries of human performance. He would then move on to skill-specific practice, honing the techniques that would later become legendary in martial arts circles. The afternoon would conclude with his notorious isometric training, where he would push his muscles to their absolute limits through static holds and resistance work. As evening approached, rather than winding down, Lee would begin his final training block from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. This session took on a more holistic approach, combining additional physical conditioning with mental development. He would engage in supplementary conditioning work, followed by dedicated mental training sessions. The evening would also include deep philosophical study, as Lee believed that mental acuity was just as important as physical prowess. The day would conclude with technique refinement, where he would perfect the movements and combinations he had practiced earlier, often working well into the night to achieve the precision he demanded of himself. What set Lee apart was his scientific approach to training. He studied anatomy, physics, and biomechanics to understand how to push human performance to its absolute limits. He maintained detailed records of his experiments with different training methods, often using himself as a test subject for dangerous new techniques. Perhaps no exercise better exemplifies Lee's extreme approach than the dragon flag. This core exercise, which he helped popularize, requires extraordinary strength and control. Lying back on a bench, supporting only the upper shoulders, the entire body is raised and lowered as one rigid unit, a move that tests the absolute limits of human core strength. Lee's cardiovascular training was equally intense. He developed a system that combined high-intensity interval training, weighted endurance work, combat-specific conditioning, progressive overload principles. He structured his cardio like boxing rounds, but with a crucial difference. He would gradually increase both the intensity and duration, pushing his heart and lungs to their absolute limits. Bruce Lee's approach transcended mere physical training, embracing a comprehensive fusion of Eastern philosophy and Western psychology. However, modern sports medicine has identified serious risks in his methods, including nervous system burnout, joint damage, and cardiovascular strain. Today's athletes have wisely modified his techniques, incorporating structured progression systems, improved recovery protocols, and scientific monitoring. Despite these risks, Lee's revolutionary methods transformed martial arts forever.